We're here today with Wesley Granberg-Michaelson and Ken Medema to speak with them about a new hymn on which they've collaborated. Wes served as General Secretary of the Reformed Church in America for 17 years and previously held the position of Director of Church and Society at the World Council of Churches in Geneva. Earlier in his career, he served as Executive and Legislative Assistant to U.S. Senator Mark Hatfield, and then as the Associate Editor of Sojourners magazine when it was founded. He presently helps guide the development of the Global Christian Forum. He's the author of many books, including Without Oars, Casting Off into a Life Privilege, Future Faith, 10 Challenges Reshaping Christianity in the 21st Century, and Leadership from Inside Out, Spirituality and Organizational Change. His numerous magazine articles have appeared in Sojourners, Christian Century, Christianity Today, the Church Herald, Ecumenical Review, and several other publications. He serves today on the governing boards of Sojourners, Church Innovations, and the Global Christian Forum. For 4 decades, Ken Medema has inspired people through storytelling and music. Though blind from birth, Ken sees and hears with heart and mind. His ability to capture spirit in word and song is unparalleled. One of the most creative and authentic artists performing today, Ken custom designs every musical moment of his performance with brilliant improvisation that defies description. And I can personally attest to this on multiple occasions. Ken's vocal and piano artistry and imagination have reached audiences of 50 to 50,000 people in 49 U.S. states and more than 15 countries on 4 continents. In 1973, Ken left his work as a therapist and began a career as a performing and recording artist. He recorded albums for Word and Shawnee Press, then in 1985 founded Briar Patch Music. Briar Patch is an independent recording, publishing, and performance booking company with headquarters in Granville, Michigan. Ken is also co-founder of Interlude Retreat Corporation, which gifts retreat experiences for music directors, run conferences and workshops, and visits churches to explore their musical possibilities. He's recorded over 40 albums, and his latest is Nothing Like the Rain. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. It's really an honor to be in the same Zoom room with people with your degrees of accomplishment. So thanks so much.
Well, I just have one thing to say about those long introductions. It's something that I learned from Tony Campolo. Tony said after he'd been introduced for a very, very long time, he said, well, of all the introductions I've ever had, that was the most recent.
Exactly. Can't argue with that, can we?
Nope.
Thanks, Brian.
So as I mentioned, Wes and Ken have collaborated on a new hymn. It's called Love Can Open Any Door. But before we get into that, I'd really love to share with the audience, each of you telling a little bit more about your backgrounds, and I relatively briefly touched on. Ken, would you like to go first?
Oh, okay. Let me see where to start. I grew up a church kid, grew up in the Christian Reformed Church, a nice Dutch Calvinist community. Found out pretty early that I had some musical gifts. I was banging on mom's piano by the age of 5, taking piano lessons by the age of 8, and did pretty well musically. Went to Michigan State, majored in music therapy, and worked as a music therapist for a number of years before deciding to go out on the concert thing. My high school experience in Grand Rapids, going to a Christian high school, I guess I was a rebel all along, and so I began asking a whole lot of questions about theology and about doctrine, and I was always the kid in the back row who, once the Bible teacher said so-and-so, I would always ask a question and say, how do you know that, or prove that, or whatever. So that was my position in life, as the guy who asked a lot of questions. Went off to college, wanted nothing to do with church or theology or religion, at least for the first year. Then my second year in college, met a Baptist preacher's daughter who was a fine musician as well. And we started hanging out together, and I discovered that she was a person with an amazing liberal, kind of open, progressive mind, and I really twigged to that, and that was really the pathway for me back to faith. And I started not only getting seriously involved in church, but also writing songs based on my experience of faith. And then all during my years as a music therapist, I just kept writing and writing and writing. Nothing much ever happened to them until toward the end of that experience. And then I sang in my own church. People began to hear me sing. Oh, you got to come sing in our church, et cetera, et cetera. So when I left music therapy, we let a few folks know that I was unemployed, and the bookings began to come in. And it's sort of been that way ever since. And when I created Briar Patch, then soon after that, I hired my present manager, Beverly and David Vandermolen, good old Dutch names. And we've been working together for about 34 years now. And I pretty much go to everybody's party, although there are some parties that I am not necessarily invited to because I'm considered a pretty way out liberal leftist when it comes to Christian artists. So, but there's plenty of work to do. So that's kind of where it is now. I live in Pleasant Hill, California, suburb of San Francisco. I have 2 children. My son and daughter-in-law have 2 grandkids, and my daughter and son-in-law also have 2 grandkids. So I'm well blessed with grand folks.
Well, good for you. I mean, your music is just absolutely amazing, and we'll hear an example of that in a few moments. But as I mentioned during the introductions, I mean, Ken's ability to improvise, I've never heard anything like it. So I hope that everyone gets a chance to hear some of his work. And as I said, he's been a mainstay at Wild Goose for many years. And I just would really encourage folks to find either the Wild Goose venue or other places where Ken is performing live, because you will not be disappointed. So Wes,
before you start, Wes,
sure.
One of my favorite things in the world at Wild Goose is that I get to do an improvisation after every main speaker, which is so cool. I get to listen to what folks are saying, and then I get to actually put what they have said into a song. So
that is so cool. And I just, I was awestruck when I first heard that. I thought, how in the world? So it's an incredible gift.
Go, Wes.
Well, listen, it is just a delight to be with Ken. I so appreciate you, Ken, and the times we've been able to collaborate together, and the hours upon hours in which I've listened to your music and been inspired. I think the most memorable one, when I turned 60, I was having sort of an existential crisis. And I then heard somehow that Ken would record songs for a person on their birthday. So I got in touch with him and said, look, I'm having my 60th birthday. Maybe it would help me therapeutically if you did a song. Well, he did, and I played it at the party I had with my friends at that point in the Reformed Church of America, and it was delightful then, and it remains delightful today. So Ken's really had a ministry in my life. That's a life that started like Ken in a strong Christian environment. This happened to be in a strong evangelical environment, a church that had on its bulletin independent, non-denominational, and evangelical. So they were clear about who they were and who they weren't. It was young life that really helped broaden, at that point, my understanding of the horizons of faith when I was in high school. Unlike Ken, I think I was perpetually the good kid. If any of you have done Enneagram, all I have to do is tell you I'm an Enneagram 3. And so then I'm always trying to succeed and be the good guy. The most rebellious thing I did was tell my parents I was going to refuse to go to Wheaton College. And went instead to Hope College. I think I was the only kid entering Hope College, which is a college of the Reformed Church in America, that was doing so as an act of rebellion. Most of them were going there because, that's what they were supposed to do. But that began to open up a new world theologically to me. I learned from the best parts of that Reformed tradition, what the full meaning of God's grace was, and how faith was never just between Jesus and me, but was also between God and the world. And that you had to have it all integrated. And that led me into the pursuit of faith and politics, which has really remained with me the whole time. I ended up, through circumstances that a Calvinist would only call providential, others would call lucky, working as the chief legislative assistant to Senator Mark Hatfield, and that was during the time of the Vietnam War and much else. And that shaped me in so many ways, as well as my belonging to the Church of the Savior, an experimental, a powerful church community founded by Gordon Cosby and Elizabeth O'Connor, whom some of you probably know has written books all about that church. One thing led to another, and I finally left politics for the ministry, was ordained in the Reformed Church of America, felt that I wanted to give my life to the church and also to ecumenical causes, because I was so distressed by the way in which those from my evangelical background and those from mainline and those from Catholic basically didn't even talk to one another, much less regard one another as fellow followers of Christ. That eventually led me to the World Council of Churches. And from there, as Brian said, I became then General Secretary of my denomination, the Reformed Church of America. That it's a good title, because half the church wants you to be a general and half the church wants you to be a secretary. It becomes pretty impossible to find your way through that. But I tried, and I think we did some decent things. And now I remain involved in ecumenical work, especially with the Global Christian Forum, and I continue to do a lot of writing. Writing, I think, is probably the most important way I express myself now. Also, I do, as COVID permits, a lot of speaking before different church groups and conferences. But that's kind of who I am. And the last thing in the world I ever knew how to do was to compose a hymn. So that's what makes this particular encounter with you, Brian, and Ken, really unique.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when you first sent me your voice recording of this, I thought, wait a second. Granberg-Michaelson is writing a hymn? Hello? What's this all about? And I thought, okay, what is he on? But I started listening to it, and I thought, no, he's not on anything. This makes sense. This is not some wild, crazy thing. But you know what? This actually is not so unusual. I've had this happen with some other folks who, people who have never been hymn writers, never written much poetry or whatever, but all of a sudden something happens and something in the brain loosens up, and I get an email that says, I just wrote my first hymn. And a lot of times people don't even have a tune, but you crazy man, you had a tune for your hymn. we had to modify part of it a little tiny bit, but basically the tune is just as you wrote it.
Well, it was unlike anything I've experienced, because literally, and I'm sure, Ken, this would be familiar to you, but I awoke in the early morning hours, and I awoke hearing this hymn, more like a chant, going through my mind. And I kind of listened, and I worked with it, and it was around the theme of Easter, and I finally kind of got it into something that seemed like it, fit together, and then got up and tried to imagine what was going on, and it felt right. And then I went on. I had a scheduled retreat I went on, and on that retreat, I kept dwelling on this, and then figured, well, I like the thrust of this, just this simple refrain or chant, but it needs verses. And so walking around the grounds of the Norbertine Abbey outside of Albuquerque, in about 2 or 3 hours, four verses came to me, as well as a kind of a tune for those. And then I didn't know what to do. And so I said, well, I'll just send these to Ken. I mean, I don't even know if he'll be able to listen to it, but I'll just send it to Ken, and then the rest is history.
So Ken, how did you go about writing this once you received that?
Well, first of all, it is not written on paper yet. It's all in the head. We do have to get it transcribed. But I listened to Wes's original recording, and one of the things I noticed, first of all, is that the chant was in 1 meter, and the verses were in a whole different meter. So I contacted Wes and I said, I love the idea of the chant, but if we're going to make a hymn out of this, really, we ought to have things together in the same meter. And I ran the idea by him, and with a little bit of resistance, he said, "Oh yeah, okay, we'll do it."
Who am I to say something to Ken Medema about how to arrange a song?
Well, actually, you
how to arrange a chapter in a book.
Well, what I say to people is that people have an instinctive idea of what music needs to sound like, and usually it's pretty right on. In this case, I knew that if a congregation was going to sing this, we'd have to have the chorus and the verses in the same meter. So that's the way we have it. So then the tune, actually, he had already composed, so I didn't have to write the tune. All I had to do is do the accompaniment, and there we are.
So without any further ado, would you all mind performing it for us?
Now, I must make a disclaimer here. I will sing the chorus. I have not memorized all the words of the verses because there's a lot of words.
Yeah.
But let me play the tune for the verses, and then we'll get Wes to read the words. But the chorus goes like this. Christ has risen from the dead. Christ has risen from the dead. Sin and death have power no more. Love can open any door. Christ has risen from the dead. Christ has risen from the dead. Sin and death have power no more. Love can open any door. Then back to the chorus. Christ has opened every... No, sorry. Christ has risen from the dead. Christ has risen from the dead. Sin and death have power no more. Love can open any door. Now, Wes, share the words of the verses.
Yeah. The first that you already heard, hell cannot hold his assent. God's grace can never relent. Hatred has met its defeat. Victory now is complete. That's the first. Then God has embraced all our pain. Healing now falls like the rain. Suffering has overcome strife, bringing the promise of life. And third, empires have lost their allure. Triumph of justice is sure. Wars now can never be won. Violence has all been undone. And finally, all of the world is redeemed. Creation's life is esteemed. Hope now can bring a new birth. Grace can envelop the earth.
How beautiful. How beautiful. So this is really quite a, masterpiece of collaboration. Wes, what are your hopes for the hymn?
Well, that's, who knows? I know how to write books and deal with publishers, and I know the great difficulty in finding audiences for books. This world of hymn writing and how people pay attention to it, it's like foreign territory for me. But I've been sharing it as I can, and I get a lot of warm response, especially when I have online the recording that Ken made of the whole thing. It's on my website, and then I also can, when we got the words transcribed through your colleague, I was also able to put that online. So it's available for sharing. But I think, Brian, the thing that I'd want to say is that for a long time, I always was troubled the way in which people, especially from my own background and tradition, celebrated Easter. They viewed Christ's resurrection as their promise to rise from the dead, and that their death was not the last word. And of course, that is essential. But as I have studied the scripture and theology, the resurrection of Jesus Christ means so much more than that. It means that the forces of sin and evil at a cosmic level have been overcome through the power of love. That's why I say in the chorus, sin and death have power no more. Love can open every door. I was thinking about this, Brian. There's a favorite icon I have, and I'm going to hold it up for those who are watching. This is an Orthodox icon. It's an icon of the resurrection. And if you look closely, you see the risen Christ has his hands on two people who are being pulled out of coffins. One is here and the other is over here. And then in the background, there are other, people looking on as Christ is breaking forth from the dead. So whenever, I used to have this in my office when I was general secretary, and people would come in, we got talking, and I'd say to them, sometimes young people would visit who were doing a catechism class or whatever. I'd say, who are the two people who are being lifted out of coffins by Jesus in his resurrection? I never found a Protestant who could answer that question correctly. They give all kinds of different guesses, but they would never answer it correctly. The correct answer is Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, because the power of Christ's resurrection is attempting to pull all humanity out of its grave and overcome all the forces of evil that are arraigned against it. It's really my ecumenical friends in the Orthodox community who've always understood that Christ's resurrection is about the redemption of the whole world, and has everything to do with the crises we face, with the ecological crisis, with the divisions between humanity. this Christ's resurrection is not just an individual personal ticket to heaven. It's a manifestation of the power of love to overcome the forces of evil and hatred in the world. And so that's what I think I tried to convey in this, that there could be an Easter hymn that would probe more deeply into the full meaning of this central celebration in the Christian calendar.
Sure, sure. Well, Ken, since you come from the music world, what is it going to look like to publish this hymn, or where does it go from here in the music?
Well, I think the written music and lyrics, I would like to send it to my friends at the Hymn Society. I'm going to send it to the website called hymnary.org. They're a really wonderful website started by Calvin College that collects hymns, some published, some non. And we've got a few friends in denominational work who are in the process of putting new hymnals together. So I think our main thing is just to keep on sharing it, to send it around to people. I certainly could see a congregation deciding that they wanted to add it. A lot of churches will have, their own little hymn collection. I can see a lot of churches wanting to add it to their own collection and sing it on a regular basis. So we'll do what we can to get it into people's hands.
The refrain that you heard Ken sing can be done almost as a chant. And I've talked to a few choral directors who could envision a processional, say at Easter, with using that refrain as a chant, almost like a teze.
Yeah, if you change the meter.
Yeah.
And so you have Christ has risen from the dead. Christ has risen from the dead. Sin and death have power no more. Love has opened every door. The choir's coming down the aisle.
Yeah, exactly.
Christ has risen from the dead. So you could do it that way.
Yeah, but if you do it as a whole choral piece, then what Ken did is right. You put it into 3/4 or 6/8 or whatever, and then the whole thing flows together as a hymn. So it could be, and probably people could come up with other ways to adapt it as well. But
I think so, and I think also we actually could make a choral anthem out of it. I've been thinking about that and what that would look like.
I sent it, I kind of told you, but I sent it to a couple other choral friends. They haven't had any real response yet, but saying, look, we need a soprano, alto, tenor, bass version of this.
Uh-huh.
Well, it could lend itself. Well, I can't do that, but there are plenty of choir directors who, maybe some of them are listening in on this, who might say, well, that would be interesting to do. What do you think, Ken?
Sure. In fact, well, actually, we can have it transcribed into 4 parts. We can do that.
Well, that'd be great, because I think that would be interesting to see what it would be like as a 4-part piece.
A lot of pieces of music start this way. They start with an idea, and you get one sort of level, and then somebody says, "Oh, let's do this with it, or let's do that with it," and all of a sudden you've got something new, and then the next level up, you get well, that could be the basis of
right.
an oratorio or
just let it go. Yeah. When I did this, I meet with a person who's I have for years and years. I've always had someone called a spiritual director, which is a kind of a tradition in spiritual formation. I find it very helpful, and so I shared this with my present spiritual director, and her response goes back to what you first said, Ken. She said, "Well, Wes, you're finally using the left side of your brain."
Ah, good.
This is why a person like me could never write a hymn or a poem or anything like that, because I'm only the other side of my brain. I don't use that side. So
Well, I could have said the same thing, but sometime maybe early in the morning it'll pop forth, Brian. You never know.
There you go.
I'm not going to hold my breath, but in any event. So do you guys have any ideas for additional collaboration? Kind of like Rodgers and Hammerstein or something?
No, we haven't talked about
We
that.
haven't talked about that. But what the heck? If he comes up with some lyrics, why not?
It kind of seems like he might be on a roll,
Yeah. I have been, when I sent it to, or like people Ken, like John Whitfleet,
Yeah.
and Greg Shear, and
Yep.
and interesting, and they both really liked it. But what they said is keep writing hymns.
Sure.
Some of them may be bad, some of them might, but just you keep at it, which is something I'd never thought of. I have a
This was a good start, but now that you've got a template, you know that you can do this. Now you keep it going and see what comes out.
Yeah, there's a favorite psalm of mine, which is Psalm 72, which is about the reign of God's justice. Very powerful. But I've often thought those are words that are really meaningful, also speak to a dimension we don't often think of. So maybe sometime I'll wake up in the morning with that going through my head. There
you go. Or maybe one of your fly fishing excursions,
There you go.
Well,
I fear I will have to check out, because we're getting ready to do a Facebook Live show in a couple of hours.
Great.
And I got to make some preparations for that. So it's a busy day, but boy, this has been fun.
Well, no problem whatsoever. I appreciate you guys, spending so much time with us, and wish you the best. And in the notes associated with this video, I will put in links. Wes, maybe you can send me the links to both the music and the
recording that Ken did, and then the initial transcription of just the tune and the verse. I'll be glad to send that to you.
That would be wonderful.
Good.
Well, guys, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Wish you all the best.
Okay.
And thank you. We'll talk again.
Let's do well.